right, I wanted to reset everyone's skills. Should I reconsider everyone's? Yeah, fuck it. What the? I'll retire Emily, Bailey, and Eureka. Because I think that'll be fun. can retire them one more time. Why not? some classes.
This video is brought to you by BetterHelp. Hey, heads up! God is dead. No, I'm not just quoting my favorite evangelical film. God is dead. I'm parodying one of our favorite non-evangelical philosophers, Friedrich Nietzsche, who dropped this legendary line in 1822, and in the process changed the course of contemporary philosophy. But much like Kevin Sorbo's Oscar-unworthy performance, these three words have gone on to be all sorts of writers, artists, and intellectuals. But such a bummer time at church growing up that they spent their adult lives militantly fighting religion. So are today's atheists carrying the spirit of Nietzsche into the 21st century? And if old Friedrich were alive today, we'd be making dank memes about how church is for normies. Well, sorry to disappoint the edgelords out there, but we think that Nietzsche's God is Dead is not just a critique of Christianity, but also a critique of atheism. So let's figure out what would happen if Nietzsche logged on to Reddit's atheist community. Today's video on the death of God. We missed the point. Okay guys, before we keep going, I want to take a second and thank this video sponsor, BetterHelp. Now, if you've ever experienced anxiety, depression, or just kind of felt overwhelmed lately, BetterHelp is a resource that can help you feel better. And for any of you who, have ever tuned into our live stream, you know that I have kind of openly struggled with depression, ADHD, and I've talked about how therapy has been a really big help. I honestly don't know if I'd be where I was in my life right now without having a great therapist. And BetterHelp's network of more than 30,000 therapists are ready to listen to and help you. After taking a brief questionnaire, you'll be matched with a therapist whose expertise fits your unique needs. And thanks to BetterHelp's remote model, you can work with a therapist whose skills might not be otherwise available in your area. Now you can message your therapist anytime and you'll receive timely and thoughtful responses. Plus you can schedule your choice of phone or video sessions to receive counseling in real time. And in the event that you and your therapist aren't a perfect match, you can easily switch to a new one for no additional charge. So, join the more than 2 million people who have taken charge of their mental health with BetterHelp by visiting betterhelp.com/wisecrack. Or you can just click the link in the video description. When you do, you'll get 10% off your first month. That's betterhelp.com/wisecrack. Now, let's get back to the show. Okay, so if you saw our recent video on nihilism, you maybe heard me use a term that I stole from one of my old professors, angry 17-year-old atheism. Now this refers to the type of resentment-fueled anti-God vibes that you might observe amongst sartorially gothic teens hanging out at suburban American malls. Now you can imagine these folks scrawling "God is dead" on the covers of their textbooks. They're carrying around a paperback copy of Nietzsche's Thus Spoke Zarathustra that they probably haven't actually read. And while Nietzsche was surely being critical of the religious proclivities of his day when he penned his famous mantra, our 17-year-old brains often miss the subtlety of what he's really saying. So if Nietzsche's most infamous 3 words don't literally translate to "God is dead," "be an atheist," "only idiots believe in magical sky daddies," and "big boys use reason, not belief," well then what do they mean? To understand that, we need to consider both the text in which he uses the phrase and the philosophical and intellectual climate in which he was writing. To offer an almost offensively quick TLDR of philosophy, since the medieval era, almost all Western philosophy had some type of formal relationship with religion. Now, for some people like Descartes, it was pretty literal, because he argued that the existence of God is what ensures the consistency of rationality. Now, for others, it was the basis for their non-religious, moral philosophy. We see this with Kant's categorical imperative, which is basically love your neighbor as yourself, except we do it because of rational principles and not divine commands. Now, when the Enlightenment came around, God was replaced by human reason as the ultimate source of truth and meaning. But even so, Western philosophy still felt pretty, like Christian-y. It remained indebted to the structures of Christian thinking for a while, even if the philosophies themselves were often overtly atheistic. Okay, think of it this way. Contemporary pop music in many ways might seem like it's just done away with the cheesy structures used by an old band like the Beatles. But in actuality, these bands are using the exact same chord structures and scales and rhythms and instruments to make music. The structure is still there, whether or not you want to say that John or Paul is dead. Okay, so enter Nietzsche's God is Dead from his book, The Gay Science. In the opening aphorism of Book 3, New Battles, he writes, "After Buddha was dead, they still showed his shadow in a cave for centuries. A tremendous, gruesome shadow. God is dead. But given the way people are, there may still for millennia be caves in which they show his shadow. And we must still defeat his shadow as well." In other words, even after God was dead, the shadow or influence of God remained. People didn't really distinguish between the shadow and the deity itself. In other words, if God was the sun, we had at best a UV-resistant umbrella to hide under and try to avoid sunburn. Now this phrase comes back later in Book 3, in an aphorism called the Madman. Now Nietzsche tells the story of a madman who runs around the marketplace with a lantern, crying incessantly, "I'm looking for God! I'm looking for God!" Immediately, the madman is mocked. Now since many of those who did not believe in God were standing around together just then, he caused great laughter. the madman replies to this mockery by saying, "Where is God? I'll tell you. We have killed him. You and I. We are all his murderers." Now, note that he says that many of those who did not believe in God were standing together just then. Meaning that this madman wasn't talking to, religious yokels, but that he was in a context where there was other atheists and it was normal to not believe in God. So the problem with the madman is that no one else really realizes the magnitude of the death of God. And this echoes the passage we've already read from New Battles, in which God is dead. We still need to defeat his shadow. Again, the important thing here is that Nietzsche isn't just saying, God is dead, religious folks are dummies, I'm the number one atheist boy. He's saying that those celebrating the death of God without adequately reckoning with the shadow are missing the point. I'll give you another example. It reminds me of the thing they used to talk about when I went to Christian youth group in high school, which was the God-shaped hole in all our hearts. Now, when youth pastors use this, they were talking about how if you're having sex or doing drugs, listening to the Wu-Tang Clan, you're just filling a hole that should be filled by God. Now, Nietzsche worries that folks are celebrating the death of God without realizing that new beliefs and systems are just unconsciously filling that same hole. In other words, Nietzsche wants to destroy your hole.
That's any religion. That is 3/4 of your religion. Because you gotta use your holes the right way.
Now, in his telling, the madman goes on to ask, how did we do this? How were we able to drink up the sea? What were we doing when we unchained the earth and sun? Where is it moving to now? Where are we moving to? How can we console ourselves? The murderers of all murderers. The holiest and mightiest thing the world has ever possessed has bled to death under our knives. Who will wipe this blood from us? There is never a greater deed. Whoever is born after us will, on account of this deed, belong to a higher history. All history up to now. But the people in the marketplace just looked at him in silence.
My farts don't sound anything like that. My farts are long and way louder, and they ring.
And then says, I come too early. Throws his lantern on the ground so it smashes. It says, my time is not yet. This deed is still more remote to them than the remotest stars. Yet, they've done it themselves. Now, it sounds a little dramatic, and it is, but the idea is that people don't even realize what they've done by killing God. And almost as an afterthought, the aphorism adds that later that day, the madman forced himself into several churches, attempted to sing a funeral rite for God, and then, let out, replied, what then are these churches now, if not the tombs of God? Okay, but let's really reflect on the madman passage, which is distinct from the madmen passage, and that's where Donald Draper convinces a board full of McDonald's executives that the Big Mac will become a new god to a spiritually empty and hungry American consumer. Now here it seems that Nietzsche isn't targeting, like religious idiots, but rather he's targeting people already identified as atheists. Of course, it could also be said that many religious folks are also in denial about the death of God, which is especially ironic to Nietzsche because the death of God is, in a way, Christianity's literal truth. For those of you who are not familiar with Christian theology, the whole deal is that Jesus, who's also God, dies on the cross, is then resurrected, making the death of God the main event. While the Christians missing the point about the death of God have hands as clean as those of Pontius Pilate, the atheists are even more complicit. Because they think God never existed in the first place, they're unable to come to terms with the magnitude of his death. Put differently, they've never acknowledged the massive influence that God has had on human thought and existence, and as such aren't able to reckon with the lack of this existential nucleus. It's kind of like how even though Santa isn't real, sorry kids, he has a real effect on Christmas present shopping and fuels a massive portion of the economy each year. Now, we see this throughout Book 3 of the Gay Science, where Nietzsche goes pretty hard on critiquing Christian morality. And I think you've probably heard a lot of this stuff before. I talked about it in the video on nihilism that we made earlier this year. Check it out if you haven't. In this critique, Nietzsche points out that Christian morality focuses meaning on heaven and the afterlife so much that people sort of neglect and reject earth and this life, which leads to a kind of nihilism. They're denying their very existence. But Nietzsche goes equally hard at those who place all their belief in things like natural science. Now, in his aphorism, Let Us Beware, Nietzsche warns against thinking of the universe as either an organism or a machine, as can be common in natural science. He points out that trying to discover scientific laws is actually a way of deifying nature, i.e. turning nature into our new God. He writes, "Let us beware of saying that there are laws in nature. There are only necessities. There is no one who commands, no one who obeys, no one
Oh
who
shit, level
transgresses."
7 group
He's
heals
noting the tendency we
the
have
party.
to take the
What the
structural
fuck?
aspects of theological thinking, i.e. there is a design to all of reality, follows a consistent and well-formed set of principles, and then apply this to the non-human world. In another aphorism, Cause and Effect, he questions whether natural science has genuinely advanced human knowledge, writing, "We call it explanation, but description is what distinguishes us from older stages of knowledge and science. We are better at describing. We explain just as little as our predecessors. The specifically qualitative aspect, for example, of every chemical process still appears to be a miracle, as does every locomotion. No one has explained the push." He's saying that sure, we've gotten a lot better at describing what's going on around us with more detail and specificity. We haven't gotten that much closer to understanding why or how any of it is actually going down. It's kind of like every time we discover a new star or supernova, we don't get any closer to figuring out why the hell we're here in the first place. We're just able to describe the cosmos in more detail. While natural science helped draw an end to a theocentric conception of the universe where everything revolves around God, it then required its partisans to take on just as much faith in something else as they once had in God. But what about those of you who might be thinking to yourself, "Michael, I'm not like other atheists. I'm one of the super smart ones who can see precisely why religion can be so evil and irrational. What would Nietzsche think about me?" Well, you might think that you have one thing absolutely right, but potentially some other stuff absolutely wrong. Now, you'd say you're correct in so much as religion, as a moral system, can be an antiquated set of beliefs that at best makes one indifferent to worldly suffering and focused solely on heaven, and at worst, can fuel tribalism, hatred, and war. But Nietzsche brings up this aspect of his Death of God material alongside what can be read as a critique of the type of scientism associated with new atheist thinkers like Richard Dawkins and Daniel Dennett. New atheists often compare the idea of God to a flying spaghetti monster, i.e. a dumb and made-up deity, for the purpose of saying both ideas are equally as stupid. But this fails to take seriously the entire legacy of Christian thought in the West, for which God very much did exist. Now, to use a contemporary analogy, even if Q doesn't actually exist, to understand the effects of QAnon on weird aunts and uncles around the world, and then to stem its negative influence, we gotta take the idea of Q seriously. In other words, to acknowledge that in some way, Q does have existential effects because enough people believe in it. In a contemporary context, we're able to understand reality and morality without a reference to the divine. But in refusing to take seriously the legacy of theocentric thought, we are setting ourselves up to repeat it. Now, to get back to our Q comparison, if we were just to say that Q is for paranoid idiots, so we don't need to understand it, we're risking creating a world where conspiracy can just run rampant with very dark and real effects. Now, this is what Nietzsche's getting at when he's critiquing atheism, as by not fully reckoning with the legacy of God, new ideas and systems will simply replace the position once held by God. Science becomes God. The media becomes God. Capital becomes God. Political ideology becomes God. The YouTube algorithm becomes God. So while Nietzsche uses the death of God as a critique of religion, it also serves as a critique against the scientism associated with contemporary atheism. Now, this scientism, according to Massimo Pigliucci, is defined as a totalizing attitude that regards science as the ultimate standard and arbiter of all interesting questions, or alternatively, that seeks to expand the very definition and scope of science to encompass all aspects of human knowledge and understanding. And following Nietzsche's critique, the scientism often equates to filling the mold left by Christianity with scientific beliefs. So rather than asking us to be anti-God or anti-science, Nietzsche is challenging us to respond to the death of God. Perhaps, by putting a posse together, waiting outside the bar where we know God likes to go get sloshed on Thursdays, and then following him home, and when the moment strikes, we just beat him to death with golf clubs. In other words, you gotta complete the act of killing him. Now, what this might look like in practice isn't completely clear, but it's at the heart of Nietzsche's broader philosophical project. Things like master morality dominating slave morality, and the idea of the Übermensch both describe individuals strong enough to respond to the death of God, not by replacing God with something else, looking for another set of transcendent values like God and nature, but by creating new values for ourselves. This is why Nietzsche is far from an angry 17-year-old atheist. And in fact, he's on the side of light and affirmation. Rather than negating human life through saying stuff like either, actually, heaven is all that really matters, or actually, science explains our whole existence. The death of God means doing away with divine shadows and affirming our own humanity in all of its immediacies. And maybe this is why the new atheists don't feel that new anymore. And why, when a comedian like Ricky Gervais does a bit about why God is dead or dumb, it's most likely just to engender more yawns. Now, oddly enough, yesterday's Richard Dawkins is today's Jordan Peterson, a figure who is precisely projecting elements of science for a renewal of a very specific reading of traditional Christianity. And whereas the atheism of the atheists often became an excuse for Islamophobia amongst folks like Bill Maher, the theism of someone like Peterson serves as an excuse for homophobia, transphobia, racism, and also more Islamophobia. Now, surely this trend will wane, and in a few years, there will be another return of a science-focused atheism that continues to ignore the critiques leveled by Nietzsche in the 19th century. And as such, we see both sides of the coin that Nietzsche was worried about in the wake of the death of God. On one side, we have those unaware of how a lack of engagement with religion leads right into a theologically infused scientism. On the other, those unaware of the death of God who use religious ideas as a way to negate humanity. Now, in both cases, these figures are pointing outside of human existence to God or science to justify a negation of life and our own humanity. And against both of these positions, Nietzsche is asking us to let God die, to finish with his funeral procession, to think creatively and affirmatively about building new values. And if more folks got this, maybe Nietzsche would be associated more with joyful affirmation than he is with scowling negation. And maybe more young people earnestly searching for meaning would embrace their ability to construct ways of life that are totally indifferent towards God's past, present, or future. So what do you guys think? We yet to deal with the full implications of the death of God? Has this led us to turn a bunch of other stuff into gods in various shapes and sizes? And are we even capable of imagining what value and meaning look like outside of a religious framework? Let us know in the comments. Before you go, I wanted to tell you about something. It's called Wisecrack Live. It's our stream. We do it Wednesdays right here on this channel from this room at 10 a.m. Pacific. You should check it out. We have a really good chat. Talk about a lot of the stuff we talk about in the channel, but it's off the cuff. It's free. It's engaging with the chat. It's a parasocial heaven. It's one of those topics where I don't think I want to try to work it out in real time in front of you all because I don't want to get in trouble. So come on down. And speaking of parasocial heaven, thank you so much to all of our patrons who support our channel. In return, we give them some extra goodies. I think it's worth it. But if you're interested, there's a link in the description. It means a lot. But thanks to all of you for just being here, for watching, for liking, subscribing, for doing all of those things that make the God of the YouTube algorithm happy so that I can keep paying rent. Until next time, God bless, and I'll see you later.
And do I really actually need I'll get level 1 of each. I practically have no reason to get them. Leveled up any further than they currently are. Oh wow, it's party.
Zonai devices are one of my favorite aspects of Tears of the Kingdom. There's just something about these things that makes them so much fun to play around with. Like, why bother walking between 2 points when you can just build a massive battle tank that inevitably explodes in your face, destroying everything and making you walk the distance anyways? I've played around with these things quite a bit and built a lot of vehicles, but since the beginning I've always had this one little thing gnawing at me. How do these things actually work? How does battery drainage work? What parts do the most damage? What's the fastest wheel? And so on. I decided to test every single one of these parts to figure out exactly how they work. Let's start with the basics. There are 27 different Zonai parts in the game. These devices can be triggered in 3 different ways: by being hit by a weapon, when Link controls them using a steering stick, or by being attached to a different Zonai device that is being turned on. In order for Zonai devices to work, they require Zonai batteries. When you start the game, you only have 1, but you can get more by going to specific constructs who will allow you to turn crystallized charges into energy wells. 3 energy wells is equal to 1 battery. You can have a total of 16 batteries, or 48 energy wells. In this video, there are 4 main attributes that I want to cover for each device. First up is battery usage. I will be measuring this in seconds per battery or seconds per energy cell, depending on which one is more convenient for the part at hand. Second, I will measure the speed that the device moves at. To do this, I will use the in-game coordinates, which, conveniently enough, are in meters. Because of this, we will be able to get the speed of the parts in meters per second. The third attribute is damage. This is pretty self-explanatory. It's the damage the device is able to deal. I calculate this by simply activating the device and using Link's health as a reference. The final attribute that I will be testing is the part's durability. As a part gets used, its durability decreases until it hits 0. When it does, it breaks. The durability can also get decreased when it gets hit by an enemy. For example, a lion, or decreases the durability of the part by 100%.
I don't really use Epaulet
which decreases the durability by a large
and
amount.
Mayara all that much, and I don't really think I want to
The
respect
Span is a staple
either
of
of
many
them, so
creations, allowing you to destroy sand piles, move objects, and even fly if you have nothing. The fan moves at a speed of 8 meters per second and takes 20 seconds to use 1 battery. The wing is another common part that is used to glide. It moves horizontally at around 10 meters a second and loses altitude at a rate of 3 meters per second. However, this speed doesn't make up for its atrocious durability, only lasting for 1 minute of use. While fusing it to a weapon does nothing interesting besides making it fly a little further, fusing it to a shield allows you to gain double height while performing a shield turn. This is really overpowered, as it allows you to get bullet time on flat ground. The cart is a pretty boring device. It's basically just a plank with small wheels attached to it that allows you to shield surf on any material. Balloons are pretty basic as well. When they are exposed to fire or high heat, they inflate and ascend. They move pretty slow at 6.25 meters per second top speed and only have a durability of 2 minutes. The rocket is easily my favorite part in the entire game. When activated, they move extremely fast for a short period of time, allowing you to make quick getaways if you attach them to a vehicle. And the best part is that they ignore weight, meaning that they will move at the same speed no matter what is attached to them. They also have one of the coolest fuse abilities in the game. They allow you to get massive height-weight shield, acting as a replacement to Revolting Scale, and if you shield surf, they just blast you forward, which is a ton of fun. Next up is the Time Bomb. When this one is activated, it explodes after 5 seconds, dealing 500 damage. The explosion is very similar to the bomb, but violent, being spherical, contained, and other stones are too great to see if they're useful. They just stay in the air in their current position when activated, but are able to be moved by rockets and such. Lights are pretty self-explanatory. They make light. Stakes are a lot more interesting than you would expect. Not only do they hold themselves and any other object to a wall, but they can also play music. Mirrors basically send a beam of light out of this front part when the ball part on the back gets struck with sunlight or a beam from a different mirror. Homing carts are little robots that move towards enemies when they spot them. You can fuse weapons or emitters to the tops of them so that they are able to fight autonomously. They move at a speed of 2.6 meters per second, consume one battery every 100 seconds, and have a durability of 30 minutes. Similarly to homing carts, construct heads will look towards enemies, but they aren't able to move around. You can mount them onto vehicles to be able to get an autonomous cannon or laser system. So that's it. Every single Zonai device in Tears of the Kingdom. There are a lot of them, meaning you can make a whole ton of different creations. I could spend hours just attaching these things together, making different vehicles and weapons. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, because I am a channel that is trying to grow, and likes help get this video recommended to more people. I I will try to make similar content to this in the future, and you will most likely only see my videos again if you are subscribed. Thank you, and have a nice day.
Game's first sub-230. A half-hour barrier hadn't been broken in 2 years. In mid-May, Senor lowered his time down by over half a minute. All 3 runners were now within 60 seconds of each other. Who would get sub-230 first? Would it be the veteran, the newcomer, or the current world record holder? Well, on May 14th, E Roadhouse got on a run with another incredible first couple of episodes. Once again, this was his best pace ever, leaving episode 2. He faltered a bit in levels 4-2 and 4-3, so his pace cooled off slightly exiting episode 4. But after episode 6, he was still a minute ahead of the record. It was clear that this would be a golden opportunity for the sub-230. And then, in episode 3-1, something strange happened. E Roadhouse was cycling through his splits to see what time saves he had left, and he accidentally paused his timer. He realized this a short while later and unpaused it, but this threw everything off. His pace would now seem better than it really was. He didn't know how long it was paused, so if this run went all the way, he'd have to retime it to see what he really got. Well, E Roadhouse made his way through episode 3, and it went beautifully. Episode 5 got off to a great start, and entering 5-5, he was a minute 21 ahead. But of course, his real pace was still a mystery. 5-5 was solid, and 5-6 was nearly perfect. And when he stopped his splits, they read 2:29:35. E Roadhouse knew his run was slower than that, but the exact amount wasn't known. It all came down to how long the timer was paused. So, it had to be retimed. And the exact length of the pause would determine if this was the world's first sub-230, or if the race would continue. And after the retime, they found that E Roadhouse's timer was paused for 21.5 seconds, meaning his run was a 2:29:57. By the skin of his teeth, he had done it. His 6th world record in a row was his most important one yet. E Roadhouse officially had the world's first sub-230. In the aftermath of this run, Zack and Senor continued doing PB attempts for a short while. Both players lowered their times, but neither could catch up to E Roadhouse.
42%.
Their motivation had just dried up. It seemed like another community break would be in order. You're probably noticing a pattern by now. Whenever community motivation is at a low point, new tricks are always found to bring people back in. And right on cue in May 2021, 2 massive tricks were discovered. One of them was a 30-second time save in 3-5 found by Los. But the one we're going to go over was the one discovered in 5-5. This trick was notable for 2 main reasons. For one thing, it was in the toughest stage of the run. 5-5 was already a completely broken level. You had DV1, DV3, and the DV4 jumps. The new trick, fittingly, was called DV2.
That word nearly kind of scares me, but I'm pretty sure it's better if I just get balance at this point, right?
And the other notable
It's 20 skill points either way, but balance is way safer.
Difficult one in the
Way more
entire
convenient,
game.
rather.
That's right. The toughest trick of the run was now in a stage that was already considered to be the hardest. This is the insanity of DV2. You start by activating a moving platform outside the boss room, then positioning Luke on a panel beneath it and placing R2 on the platform. When the platform moves down, you can collide into Luke as he's sliding off the panel. If done at the perfect moment, Luke will go through the wall under the floor of the next room, and you can just walk underneath the boss fight. Getting the clip into the wall is so precise that pause buffering is used to help line it up. And even so, every single step of this trick is hard. It's hard to get on the panel, it's hard to stay on the panel, it's hard to pause buffer at the right time, it's hard to line up Luke, it's hard to line up R2, it's hard to avoid going too low in the boss room, it's hard to avoid going too high in the boss room. Any of these portions not being done correctly results in a miss. But if done properly, it would save an additional 50 seconds. A team of Lava Fang 407, Node KO, and EJP Man created DV2. And it made stage 5-5 a nightmare. Tough trick after tough trick, right at the end of the run. But with all the time save potential, people had to go for it, and it brought runners Zack and Senor back to doing runs. They each got times of 2:30, and then on June 1st, Senor set the world record. It had a rough episode 6, particularly a slow ultra kill in 6-5, but he got DV2 on his second try. A fantastic result for such a tough trick. He closed it out 20 seconds ahead of the Roadhouse, Senor's first world record in over a year, back when the run was 12 minutes slower. So now, of the top 3 competitors, only one had yet to get the world record: Zack. He'd been in the top 3 for the past 5 months, even moving into second place on several occasions, but he had never been able to take the top spot. It was frustrating. He knew he was good enough, he'd been on pace before, and he also had a bit of time on his hands coming up. So, Zack decided to start a devoted grind for the record. But this wasn't going to be just any grind. He was going to play the game 14 to 15 hours per day until he set the world record. Zack began on his quest, and over the next 2 weeks, he played the game for roughly 200 hours. Run after run, good pace after good pace.
I think Warrior
Despite all that,
or Blitz Command would
he
be
didn't
all that
achieve a
useful.
world record. In fact, he didn't even
And
get
Great
a PB.
Warrior turns Umaga
Zack
into a
remained in
perfect
third
sword and
place,
spear and
behind
shield.
E Roadhouse and C.
Literally, actually.
Disappointing for sure, but Zack would still get another chance.
I don't really know what else
Because on June
I can
13th,
give her.
runners Zack, E Roadhouse, and Lee Super all met up to grind for the world record 12 hours a day, with Senor also participating at home. Only 12 hours may have been less than Zack was used to, but still, 4 of the best runners in the world, 12 hours per day, for 3 days straight. Surely a world record was incoming. But it never happened. 72 hours came and went, with no world records. And here's why.
It's still probably better
Between all
from
4 runners,
getting.
more than 20
Nah.
world record paces were achieved into the final
Just
2
better off staying
levels.
selfish.
All of them died to DV2. It was such a hard trick, and trying to execute it when feeling the pressure of a record-paced run, good luck with that. So for Zack, a grind of 12-hour days hadn't worked. 14-hour days hadn't worked either. So he had only one remaining option. On June 16th, Zack began a grind
I'll go
of
for HP and
16-hour days to get
I'll
the
get more
Lego
level.
Star
I'll get
Wars
more
world
skills
record.
anyway. Skill points. And then I'll decide what to do with those instead.
And he never had any runs on record base. It was starting to seem hopeless. But on June 18th, Zack finally got a run deep ahead of the record. And what a pace it was. Entering 5-5, his best possible time was 2:28.43. That was a good enough pace that he didn't even need to do DV2. He could get the record without it. But Zach was committed to going for it, and on just his third try, he got in the wall. If he could just make it to the end of the room, he'd be in the clear. But disaster struck. He went too low and died, forcing him to start DB2 over again. He lost over a minute and ended up missing the record by just seconds. Had he skipped doing DB2, he would have had the world record. So, Zach kept going. More long attempt sessions, more failed runs. But on June 24th, he'd find himself in an eerily similar situation. A best possible time of 2:28.08 into 5-5. Once again, he could skip DV2 and still get the record. But once again, he was committed to going for it. It was a decision that cost him the record last time. But this time, he hit it first try. He was in a golden position now. He closed out 5-5, got door clip, and when Zach entered the Millennium Falcon to end 5-6, he had just set a new world record by over a minute. After months of grinding and hundreds of hours of world record attempts, Zach's efforts were vindicated. This record didn't stop others from trying. Senor, E-Super, and E-Roadhouse all continued doing record attempts after the in-person meetup. But eventually, their attempts stopped, in large part because 5-5 was such a demoralizing stage. So, throughout the rest of 2021, Zach's time remained at the top of the leaderboard. He went from not being able to set the record to holding the top spot for 6 months straight. In early 2022, Zach decided to come back to the game. It had taken him hundreds of attempts and many months of grinding to set his world record. And on top of that, he hadn't seriously ran the category in half a year. So, expectations weren't too high when he started up runs again. But instead of being the underdog like he was in 2021, this was the Zach of 2022. Last year, it was a big deal when Zach finally managed a world record. This year, he was unstoppable. E-Roadhouse, Senor, E-Super, none of these guys could catch up. By June, he had taken his time down to 2:27.19. Zach was using even more 1P2C than in previous runs. 4-4 was now being done almost completely with 2 controllers. But once again, most of the time saved from these records was Zach playing better. Tricks were being done faster, and execution overall was improving. Improving to the point that nobody could catch him. He was more than a minute ahead of second place. But then, after his 2:27.19, the world record stayed stagnant for over 2 months. This was despite the fact that he lost 30 seconds for missing Dooku skip in 2-6, and lost significant time in 5-1 as well. The community's goal was to achieve a 2:26. It seemed doable, but Zach was unable to, and nobody else was particularly close. The community was as active as ever, but with no records being set, a big opportunity was going to waste. So, in an attempt to get the game a new world record, the community decided to organize one more big event. It was going to be another 4-day break the record session. But instead of the game's top 4 runners competing, this time they expanded it to the top 10. 10 runners, 4 days, and a goal time of 2:26.
I'll get more levels. I can max out the
Even
Panda
with
Mastery
this
again.
many runners, nobody knew for sure if a new record would be set. But one thing that wasn't in doubt was that there would be a lot of movement on the leaderboards. Zach and E-Roadhouse were in first and second place, and they were the favorites to lower the record. Just behind them were Bacon Soda and Bricko, still with decent odds to get the record. And beyond them was a mix of prior record holders and newer contenders. Their personal bests ranged from Zach's 2:27 down to a 2:33. but all of them knew that they had a serious chance to move up on the leaderboard. Let the world record attempts begin. Zach and E Roadhouse may have been in the best positions to lower the record, but 4th place runner Rico got the first good chance. Just hours into day 1, he had a run with the best possible time of 2:25:46 into episode 3. There was still a ways to go, but it was easily on world record pace. Unfortunately, a poor episode 3 cost him the record, but he still got a 2:27:47. This was good enough for 2nd place. It was a big motivator for the rest of the group, especially for the recently demoted to 3rd place Roadhouse. And toward the end of day 1, both he and Zach found themselves on record pace into 5-5. But DV2 would strike again. E Roadhouse finished with a 2:28:25, and Zach got a 2:27:45. Zach's time was faster than every runner on the leaderboard, except for his own record. Day 1 had come and gone, and despite movement from some top runners, no new records were set. Day 2 featured a couple PBs from runners in the top 10. Wii Super got a 25-second PB cut, and Seymour moved from 5th to 4th place. But for most of the day, none of the top runners got anything on world record pace. Then, late in the night, after most runners were done for the day, Zach had a run with 2:27:11 potential into 5-5. But of course, he still had to get DV2. And he actually did it first try. This was the best chance of the event. He had one tough trick to go: door clip. And unfortunately, he couldn't get it. He lost over 20 seconds and finished with a 2:27:38. The best time of the event so far, but still no world record. Day 3 featured several more promising runs from Zach. He achieved numerous 2:27s, but none were low enough to beat the record. There was a bit of movement from lower-ranked runners, as It's Jared moved from 10th to 8th place. But as Day 3 was coming to a close, the record remained at Zach's 2:27:19. Time was starting to run out. The game's top runners had gotten close, but nobody had been able to break through. But then, toward the end of Day 3, those runners would get a bit of extra motivation. With all this attention on LEGO Star Wars speedruns, a new strategy was found in the Grievous fight. Before, Grief Cheese could be used to get a quick kill, but it was inconsistent as he would randomly block your shots. But by switching your resolution to 800x600 instead of 1920x1080, the quick kill becomes much more consistent. On average, you save 10 to 15 seconds. This wasn't an enormous time save, but it was enough to give these runners a pretty big boost. Yet still, Day 3 came to a conclusion, and no world records were set.
Say goodbye to Sword Pro, innocent.
Yet still, Day 3 came to a conclusion, and no world records were set. 24 hours to go. Through the first 3 days, neither Zach nor E Roadhouse had set a PB, but Zach certainly had had the better chances of the two. He set numerous 2:27s, and with the new time save on Grief Cheese, he was in position to get a record if he could just get there again. But on the evening of Day 4, it was E Roadhouse who found himself ahead of the record after episode 6. After utilizing the new strategy and having a nice start to episode 5, he remained in the lead, heading into 5-5. This was the level that caused Zach to miss the record so many times in the last 3 days. But E Roadhouse clutched it out. He got a first try DV2, and entering 5-6, his best possible time was 2:26:40. He Roadhouse was one level away from getting a 226. He needed to get Doorclip. And he did, after wasting about 20 seconds. The run was now teetering on the line of being a 226 or a 227. And in the end, the run finished as a 227.03. It wasn't a 226, but it was a world record. It had taken over many days, but the world record had finally finished. And interestingly, that eating stats was like
Holy shit, I just remembered about Fear and Hunger. I'm still supposed to play that game. I'm pretty much done already here. I was hoping I could start grinding the levels, but I suppose I can do that later. Yep, there he is. Whew! Alright, looks like I'll have to do the grinding later. Let me just heal up everyone and then I'll end this here. It's time for me to Fear and Hunger.
What are you playing?
Some other RPG. Doesn't matter, don't worry about it too much.
Yeah, I'm gonna look that. Fear and Hunger, yeah, good game. It's time to get good to them again.
Yeah, hold on. Let me just finish up the last stuff I need to do in this godforsaken grind fest of a game.
What game?
Etrian Odyssey, I don't think I've ever talked about this. Alright, I just need to set the party again. I am in slight need of a new party for farming.
Farming.
And I guess I'll try making a main team. An all-purpose team.
You're not open with what I like to call it. Are you ready, sir? Are you ready? Are you ready to open the door?
Hold on. All I have is piercing, wow.
Ito ba rin, man? Spicy lobster. Na lake. Yan pa naman. Ang parang first house sila. Hindi naman maangat.
There is no slashing in this team, but I guess that's technically the Tiger's job. Whatever. This'll do.
What tiger job? What?